Today, we gonna dive into how do we actually create a hospitality concept that stands out in this, ever crowded market as, even after the pandemic, where we just see more and more new things are coming, new concept. And actually also people want more and more human connection because the advancement of the way we work, the way we live, so much has gone digital. And I think actually, funny enough, of the panel recently where we talked about AI, is AI actually going to kill hospitality? I don't think so, by the way, but I think AI is going to do a lot of great things for hospitality. But actually, we need then to think about what kind of experience are we then creating from a guest experience to also to the physical experience and to how people feel when they leave a hospitality venue. And by accident, or because Holly and her team reached out and wanted to talk about this, I had a couple of conversations with Holly, that's today's guest, about how do we actually do that and how do we actually design that into our brand, but also in our physical location. So welcome to the show, Holly.
Thank you. Hi, nice to be on.
Holly, just for people to get a bit of context and understanding that what your background is and also what you do now and the typical work you're going to go and solve for people and why we can have this conversation about, how do you create both the brand and the physical experience that's needed to stand out in a crowded market.
Yeah. So Holly Hallam, Managing Director of Design LSM. My background is an unusual route to the design world. I started off in TV and marketing, looking at kind of guest experience and brand interpretation, and then moved on into, after kind of juggling that, moved into marketing and business communications. So had a consultancy that was looking at kind of marketing and brand strategy and communication and commercial strategy. And then sort of navigated that through after maternity leave to join DESIGNLSM. So I started at DESIGNLSM as a marketing manager, bringing in sort of my knowledge into brand and brand communications and looking at how we could sort of evolve our design process to look at it more strategically. And then sort of the rest is history. After being within the organisation for sort of 9 years, I took over as MD after one of our business founders retired. And then last month, my business partner and I purchased the remaining shares from the other business founder when he retired. And so now we're kind of starting our whole new chapter with myself and Rachel.
Yeah, and that's super interesting because we already had a conversation that we'll come back to that transition between generation and taking over ownership of new business. Because we always in the business world talk about startups and launching new businesses, and sometimes there's a lot of value that disappears in businesses that's actually there's no buyer or generational shift to it. But we'll come back to that because I think that's a really interesting thing. Can you talk a bit about the typical work you do with clients and what is the challenge you go in and come and help with, and what kind of transformation have you created over the years? And maybe there's some known clients within there where people say, oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're unusual as a design agency, and so obviously we specialize in design for hospitality. But I think the kind of our uniqueness is that we are very strategic focused, which is that skill set that I believe I've brought into the company. So everything starts off with very much looking at a brand, looking at their commercial proposition, and looking at their guest experience proposition. So rather than it always starting from a design lens, it starts more from a strategic lens, which there's great benefits of that in terms of the way that we kind of embed ourselves with our clients. So we intrinsically understand what it is they're trying to achieve. I think design is such a personal experience and it's such an intangible thing. So often when we get clients, even with brands that have been going for ages, they're sort of like, I want this evolved vision here, or I've got this new concept and I want to do something different. And trying to get them to articulate that and trying to kind of turn that into reality and three-dimensional physicality is really difficult. And so I think it's really important for us to take a step back before we jump into that design process and really kind of integrate ourselves into that client or that client's company and understand sort of what's their driving force to do that. Where's their passion? What is it that they're envisaging? What is that one thing? What's the tone of voice of the brand? So that we can really, when we create something, we're really creating something that's holistic. Because I think it's interesting, I'm jumping around now, but Charles Spence wrote a book called Gastrophysics. And in it, he said that taste is all about perception. Majority of your taste is about perception and expectation. And so therefore, as like the guardian of that physical experience for this brand, which I see ourselves as, we've got to kind of set that expectation, and we're setting that perception. As soon as someone walks through that door, that experience is starting for them. Their taste journey has begun even before they've sat down and picked up their knife and fork. So it's really important that we understand kind of everything that goes into that brand and what the DNA and tone of voice and personality is. And also how they as a business are going to market that brand and how they want to see it evolve, because that perception obviously is what the customer engages with before they've walked through the door into that physical space. It's all part of that journey. So on a day-to-day basis, sort of when we're working with clients, we really try and embed ourselves into that journey, understanding and kind of delving into deeper than I think most people do, into like kind of what their commercial goals are, where they kind of building their portfolio, what that experience is that they want to generate, what their team kind of ethos is, and what their values are. I think all of those things are just really important questions before we even ask, do you like this color, or where do you want your waiter station to be, etc. So I think that's how we work with our clients on a day-to-day basis, and that looks at everything from having workshops with them, going in sometimes to observe a service with them, doing kind of tours with them, looking at other places that they find inspiring, whether that be hospitality spaces or community spaces or retail. So we try to really understand sort of the broader them rather than just that one piece of them, which is the concept, the physical concept that we're trying to create.
And that's super interesting, because I get also the relevance of the space stands longer when you do that, because you're going into the core of the business. You talked about their values, their culture, in really understanding what is their goals, from a commercial point of view, what is that they want to achieve in this space. But one of the things I was thinking as you were talking about that is like, what are the typical places where that's the hardest bit for you to get out of the businesses you've been working with over the years? Like, where is the biggest gap where often that you have to work quite hard to get that out, really to have that insight to go and do a better job?
Yeah, interesting question, because I think it really depends. We work across hospitality, so because we're strategic focused, we don't have a house style and we don't have a specific type of hospitality sector we work in. So we work with everything from like 9,000 square foot food halls in Toronto, which we kind of did last year, to hotels, to small coffee shops. So that really depends on who you're working with, because it could be a really entrepreneurial startup who's so passionate about their food and their service, for example. So, as an example, we work with Sam's, who is one of my favorite restaurants. They've got Sam's Waterside and Sam's Riverside, and they've got a Sam's Larder concept and Sam's Kitchen concept. But we've worked with them like right from the beginning, and their thing is really passionate about service and food and just generally creating a fantastic kind of hospitable environment for their restaurants. And so for them, trying to get out of them sort of what does their passion look like? Trying to get out of them, kind of describe visually what a great experience looks like. Describe kind of what, your best plate of food is going to look like, or how somebody's going to experience that. So trying to get out of them sort of that very esoteric concept of great hospitality is really interesting. Whereas on the flip side, we are working with the RFU, for example, and converting and refurbishing their hotel at Twickenham Stadium. And so for them, they are very much a different organization. They're not the RFU. They're used to hospitality, but in a much different way in terms of, capacity of like, I think it's 82,000 people, big events, et cetera, et cetera. So for them, they're getting out of their vision. Theirs was all about the fact that they've got this massive building that's really iconic in the middle of a community that lots of people recognize. But how do they create a community within the hotel that we're now trying to create? How do they create something outside of the rugby that they're known for, or the events they're known for? So how do they create a hospitality experience outside of those match days that appeals to building a community for not only the locals, but also for others that are coming, travelers or leisure users, business users, etc. So getting out from them kind of a sense of purpose and a sense of concept creation that creates that engagement is something completely different from what I was saying about with Sam's, where it was all about kind of aesthetic vision, because sort of they're so close to the concept. Whereas with, this other project with the RFU, it's kind of a totally new evolution of something that's already there, and they haven't quite yet envisaged how that might evolve, but they know the goal of where they want to get to with it. So it really depends on who we're working with, which is why I really love what I do, because every day could be totally different. Yet there's always kind of a little problem or a little a little route that we have to explore, and we have to work really closely with our clients to kind of get through and kind of understand what that journey is, so that we can then create something that really delivers on kind of their vision and their kind of objectives.
Yeah, and one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking as well, like everybody has to find their own algorithm to build whatever greatness look for them and how they express that. But actually really interesting, I was having lunch recently in London at the Shoom, and most people know the Shoom for a very unique hospitality experience. And that you can see is embedded in everything they do. And that first class hospitality experience, both for how they treat their people, but also how they deliver these outstanding experiences, and to the physical site, how it experienced from you come in. And this guy I had with me, it was the first time he was coming to the Shoom, and he said, this is going to taste really good. He said that before he's seen any food. He could just feel the fit. He said, this beautiful location and the way I've been greeted, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, I'm sure. Try the black dal, as I said to him. And he did that. And it was great. And it just comes again, they also very clear. They have, and I think what you're saying as well, like if you have made your hospitality concept in a 3D format, even if you've written it down, some people have a book of culture, I call it, where it's very clear. This is our vision. This is our positioning. This is how we see ourselves. This is how the values are in the business. This is how we act on them. And this is how we grow our business. They will have different things they believe in. The easier it is actually to go in and do a really well job on the location, on the menu, on the employee and customer experience, and so on and so on and so on. And I think that's really interesting, because lots of people forget that work when they get busy and grow their businesses very fast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We sat down with Gaucho a couple of years ago when Martin brought back Gaucho out of the CVA, and obviously he had seen Gaucho grow and then left to create his own concept, and then came back. And when he came back, we sat down with him and was like, right, Gaucho is a really well-known brand. It was quite disruptive into the marketplace in terms of its aesthetic, was really kind of stand out and quite iconic when it first started. And then over the years, other people came into the market. I think it probably, it became known, and I don't think it was as disruptive as it had been, and other brands came in and maybe took over some of its positioning. So when Martin came back to the brand, we very much sat down and were like, right, new chapter for the brand. Where do we want to take it? What are its values? Where do you want it to be? And I think it was really important that in that first meeting that we all had, as we really understood sort of, what was his commercial ambitions for the brand? What were his values for the brand? And so we started talking about sort of sustainability and kind of all of that ethos that we wanted to look at, not only from a materiality perspective about how we design the space, but also through operations. So, they are one of the first steak restaurants to be zero carbon. And so it was really important for us to kind of explore that whole supply chain that he was talking about, and how actually one of the brand values was it being about authentically Argentinian. And so we were talking therefore about the supply chain and the wine and the steak, and then how can we bring that story through more into interiors. So we then worked with like photographers and videographers to go out and actually film cowboys kind of in Argentina. We looked at actually a lot of the materiality coming from Argentina. So we have backs of chairs, for example, that are covered in sort of the saddle rugs, for example, from Argentinian cowboys' horses. And we looked at the inspiration from the Andes and the claywork. We've got this kind of claywork walls that run through as a DNA across all of their different properties. And that's quite iconic now in the new design, because it's reminiscent of the Andes and the kind of the mountain, the geological formation of them. So I think there's loads of things like that go back to that original workshop question and that original kind of creating that, as you say, the 3D sort of experience. But also, we really talked about his team that he was, and his uniform, and how was he going to create this team, and what was he going to do to empower them and for them to embody his values. And so then we started talking about tone of voice that would go through into their team handbook as well. And so it really is kind of a whole 360 experience of just making sure that everything is aligned and there's that kind of thread that runs through it all. And I think, since then as a brand, they've expanded massively. And it was last year, I think they reported like 75 million pounds in their of revenue for that financial year, which was like 23% like for like growth based on pre-pandemic levels. And I just think I was really pleased and impressed with that figure. But I think it just shows, I think, when you actually have that thread and when you understand what that language or what that tone of voice or DNA, is that should run through, and you actually embody it into all of those key touch points, then I think it really resonates with people, not just people who visit, but also people who work there as well. And I think that then creates a much better experience.
Yeah, and I guess actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I think we're already touching on it, is like, is that actually the work that needs to be done to have a concept that stands out in the, I call it after the pandemic, the new era of hospitality, because we are going through some systemic shifts. But I like one of those things, and not just enough to have one element that works really well. Before, you could be really good maybe at service, has a great menu, it tastes really nice, and you could actually do really well. But if you really want to make a dent, you really need to manage all these elements of the brand experience on a much higher level, and it needs to be much better connected. I think that's what I hear you say as well.
Absolutely. I think, I think there were no trends that are new from post-pandemic, but I think what the pandemic did was accelerate and accentuate trends that were already bubbling away. But I think one of them definitely is even more so now because of kind of the cost of living crisis and things like that, is that value spend. So people are spending much more now based on their ethical values or their social values, or, whether that be around their moral compass or whether that be around the kind of experience that they're wanting to create at that time. So whether it be sort of around wellness or whether it be about social vibrancy, but people are choosing, I think they're much more savvy about where they're spending their money. And brands, because of social media and, just the amount of communication we get on a daily, constant basis, brand is so much more important. And emotional engagement is so much more important because there's so much noise. People are spending their money or choose to spend their money more with brands that they are emotionally engaged with, or speak or reflect their choices at that time, whether that's their lifestyle choices or their social choices. So I think having those dots joined up by hospitality brands is really important because it creates that deeper emotional connection and engagement. And I think, again, pre or post pandemic, it's that emotional engagement that people were craving when they came out of social isolation, as it were, from. And I think, therefore, those brands that has succeeded had that emotional engagement there. And I think that's really important. And I go back to like Sam's, who, as I say, love them as a client and as a brand. But they'd only been open 6 months with their restaurant in Hammersmith before COVID shut down. Yet during COVID, they and I wish I could remember the figure now, but I think it was in the thousands of promise vouchers that the local community and visitors bought from them during COVID to support them for when they reopened. And I was like, that just proves to you that it is about that experience. It is about that emotional engagement, because just in 6 months, short space of time, they had built up such an emotional engagement with people that really wanted to support them, that they were willing to give them money as a promise for something that would come in the future. And I just think that was really, really touching, because it really showed to me that actually, if you do connect all those dots, if you do have a great environment and you do have fantastic hospitality, and you've got a team that are really embodying and delivering on those values, then that's the power that you can create.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting. That's a great example. I never, like, 6 months is no time, you would think, but again, you can actually touch 1,000 people, which is enough to run any kind of reasonable, successful business. 1,000 fans, there's a study around. That's a different conversation. But what I think is really interesting, also what I hear in the moment, is that also when you look at the concepts that stand out, and we talked about DeShoom before, and I come up with a number of others, is that they just came out of the pandemic where they understood that we had lacked human touch and, authentic human touch. And that's what we really want to get out and have. And they understand the scale with the cost of living crisis. That's we need to do even more of. And therefore they just speed up on that kind of element of, training their people or make it clear in their concept. There's lots of human touch. And I think actually more than ever, we are hungering for human touch points in our life. And actually, so that's in principle what you're selling. The food has to be good. The service has to be good. But actually, it's about how do you make me feel in that moment, especially if it's a physical restaurant. I'm in that restaurant, having that experience. And it was really interesting. There was a hospitality leader I talked with recently. He said, I know my front of house is working when people take their phones. I don't have one because we're not allowed to have that. So when you take your phone and put it away, when I see people might be on the phone and then because they're in this environment and the conversation is so good because the environment facilitates a great conversation with the people you're eating with, and the phone disappears or turned around or put to the side, I know we are succeeding in the new age of technology, which was very interesting. Is that then where everything comes together in the concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the point, is that when we look at planning a space, after we've done sort of our strategic immersion, we look at that plan and we look at kind of how do we make it as immersive as possible for people to kind of be in that moment. It's really important, that we're responsible for creating memorable moments, basically, and moments of joy and positivity. And I think it's, that's what I see ourselves as. I mean, part of our sort of mission statement is about creating beautiful spaces that kind of have iconic design, but that bring positivity to the people who work within them, but also the people who visit them and experience them. And I think that's really important, because we are the guardians for our clients to creating that part of that journey. And it is really important. And I think, that's something we really are mindful of when we're designing. It's not just the aesthetic design, it's also the physical and emotional design that we have to bring in to create, exactly as you just said, as one of your previous speakers had talked about, is that moment where people put the phone down, they connect and engage with other people, or they connect with the space, and they're creating those really kind of important moments and memories.
And I think it's quite interesting as well, if you think about that in the context of things is just going to go faster. And
Good.
you're just going to get, and you talked about before, you're getting more and more information. So it's actually not winning the digital war, because that's a mission impossible, but it's actually scaling those experiences. The small intervention that is actually difficult to scale, but actually it's great then it's difficult to scale, because that really becomes the unique advantage you have. And I think, we talked about the shoe, we talk about Pizza Pilgrims. You mentioned Sam's. You're absolutely spot on there again. It really comes down to every element of that journey you're on and creating some concept. So how do you then? What I was thinking when I was preparing for this? Okay, that's great. You're doing the strategic work. You understand the client need, but how do you then translate that into the to physical things? Is there like an algorithm, or is this a bit like a journey you go on, and then you, like you did with Gaucho, and think, oh, this is what we need to do. We need to go and interview some people in the supply chain. But is it different, or is there like an approach you are having for that to bring it to life?
I don't think there's that would be good if there was an algorithm. I think it would make our team's jobs a lot easier. But because I think we work with so many different types of clients and different sectors within the hospitality industry, I think it is unique to them all. But I think that the main thing is being inquisitive, that being curious, being inquisitive. Because I think if you are inquisitive, and I always say to our studio, don't just think about the immediate thing that's in front of you. Think about the wider picture. Just when you're starting to explore or ask questions, don't just ask the obvious question about how many covers do you want? Where's the bar? Where do you want the wait station, et cetera, et cetera. Think about that wider experience and be more inquisitive and look at it. Take a journey and take kind of really abstract routes around that one piece of information that you're trying to look at, because I think that's when we start to really strategically understand the space that we're creating, because you've kind of taken a step back from it, because it can be really can't think of the word, but it's really obvious to jump straight in and look at a general arrangement plan, basically, and to understand sort of the journey. One of the key things that Simon, my previous business partner who retired last month, said, it was the potato journey. So that's known within our studio as take the journey of the potato. So it can be really obvious to jump into the journey of the potato, which is basically the delivery route or the operational route of a restaurant or a hotel. So take that journey from outside being delivered in its sack all the way through to the plate. So we have the obvious, which is our potato journey and our guest journey, but it's the unobvious that we always kind of make sure that people ask and look at as well. So I think that's really important. And I think going back to sort of examples of that is we work with Blackstone and Warner Leisure. And so as part of our involvement with them, we went onto the floor and we stood and we did for a day. We watched the three services, the lunch, the breakfast, the lunch and the dinner. And we were watching like, how do they serve? What is the problems that the staff are having? What is the kind of great opportunities for guest engagement that they're missing or that they're delivering on? How can we sort of amplify those, or how can we solve any problems that they're experiencing? And then also looking at really, things outside of our remit, but how are they serving? For example, are they serving all the starters out at once? Because it was a buffet. One of their restaurants is a buffet restaurant. So, how are they serving that? How long is food being left out for? Can we look at improving that service? Can we look at speeding up, the journey for the guests if there are queues? So it's all of those things that we started to look at one of their existing sites, so that when we did this new site, we were kind of looking at opportunities and current constraints and trying to resolve all of those things as well, aside from, as I say, the potato journey or the guest experience usual journey, and then aside from the kind of brand aesthetic, colours, materiality, etc.
And it's really interesting how you get involved. You go out to the front line to learn. And actually, my background, I did a lot of HR director, operations director, and actually the best strategies we created when I was in that position at OMD was that actually we went out and talked with the front line, observed the front line, and actually just took total open glasses on and not looking at the operation as we normally would do, is through a lens of a P&L. End of day. That's how you look at it. And that becomes a problem because you can't really hear or see what the real problems in the front line is. And I've done similar thing as a consultant as well. And just keep on asking these questions. Why? Why is that happening?
Yeah.
And why is those table over there taking longer to serve than others? And why is the door put there? And why did you put your wines on that shelf? And there's so many questions. And then you start thinking they just randomly had ended there. There was no plan. They just ended there, but it maybe has a consequence, good or bad, without knowing it.
Absolutely. And I think we've just done a workshop with a client who I said to them, right, we would like your ops director, we'd like your branding director, we would like your marketing director, we would like this rounded team to come into this workshop. And they were like, that's a lot of my top line managerial staff that you're wanting to take a whole day out of your workshop. And he was like, really? Do you really need them just to design this one hotel for us? And I was like, yes, we do, because I want to understand, where are you marketing? What is that experience that they're getting pre-arrival? How is that arrival communication occurring once they have booked with you? And then how does that travel through once they're on site? And then how are you following up that once they've left the site? And we had this workshop and everyone was so engaged and they were that was really, really invaluable because actually we started thinking about things that we'd not thought about before. And the questions that you're asking, I always say at the beginning is, I'm not going to be impertinent by asking why and seeming like I'm being rude. It's I'm pressing you on why to make sure that the things that you're answering me aren't just formed out of habit. They're formed from a reason. And that reason still is valid or still has a purpose. And it was really interesting just watching people and watching actually the client's face who was sort of as the workshop was developing and he could see all of his team engaging and we actually came up with some new kind of concept ideas and some new guest experience touch points that they hadn't thought about because we actually had space to talk and we actually had space to get people in the room that sometimes usually aren't in the room because they're so busy just delivering on their day-to-day tasks. And I think that for me was really magical last week because it was just actually, you can see why this is important because now we all have a better understanding of that journey that we're now embarking on together. And that makes that result so much stronger.
Yeah, and actually, I totally agree. And it is really interesting. I had this conversation with a friend the other day, and he was talking about strategy, and it was important. The leadership sets that strategy. I said, no, it's not strategy before you involve your people, because then you can act on your strategy. And also, you probably make a totally wrong strategy. Well, I worked in there. I had their jobs. Yeah, but that's 10 years ago. It doesn't really matter what you did 10 years ago. It's not relevant. So it's again, actually on also just putting the ego away and actually say, I know nothing about my business, going in with that. And actually people now going to tell me if I like it or not, then I can go and validate it later. But actually asking questions, or maybe have someone like yourself, an external person coming, asking these questions and pruning for these questions. That's also what you do when you come from the outside. Because you're just interested, because you want to know to do the best job you can do. And I think really there's a lot to learn from, and to do that actually, if you want to build a great business, that's really a key thing, and be open to that.
Absolutely. I think sort of, I always, as I said at the beginning, my journey to owning a design studio has been an unusual one. But I do think a part of my very initial remit in my early days as a runner back on the Big Breakfast was to investigate and look at and form questions for our celebrity guest interviews. And so therefore my ability to research, and that's where I think it came from, be curious, don't think of the obvious question, look around the question that you're trying to get. And I think that's exactly that, is that being open and being curious leads us to kind of gives us the opportunity to kind of just, or that freedom to think a bit more without constraints, so which leads us to more interesting solutions, or leads us to ask those questions that weren't the obvious ones, that then kind of, that come out left field with making people kind of think about things in a different way.
And you talked about constraints there. It's quite interesting. And really, because, you are not just sitting talking with leadership team, you're out there, you just said, we're out there with the front line. If there's like a problem, you could take a magic wand and get it to disappear in the industry. What would that problem be right now for you to be able to help hospitality businesses make even better concepts, experiences, etc.?
Sure, I think the problem I would take away is I think actually it's probably not. What if I could cheat on this answer? But I think it's probably not. I think it's probably not to do with sort of making better concepts. I think it's actually to do with getting the recognition that the hospitality industry deserves. Because I think, certainly, as I said, my background was nothing to do with hospitality. And as I came into the world of hospitality, and as I was fortunate enough to sort of be, as I was growing up, taken to great hotels around the world and restaurants, my eyes suddenly opened up to hospitality. It isn't just a hotel. It isn't just a restaurant. There are thousands of people's lives dependent on this one experience that I'm having, whether that be the design or the supply of the kitchen equipment or the supply of the EPOS system or the security system or the music or there's so many industries that supply into the hospitality industry. And there's so many jobs that I wasn't aware of at school. It wasn't like somebody, when you were sat down at your kind of careers day, people take hospitality. For me, hospitality at school was always like, it's a stopgap to be a waiter or a waitress as between, while you're at uni or something like that. There was never this, actually, there's these amazing careers and these amazing industries around hospitality that kind of make up this great industry. And I think even more so, we noticed with Brexit, how many of our clients really struggled with team and good team and being able to open and serve because of suddenly a team disappearing. And I think that's because we haven't, within the UK, celebrated and placed the importance on hospitality as much as we should. And so I think my problem, I'd like to wave my magic wand to, is for people to recognise, or for it to be more regarded as an actual career choice, and to see all of the varied careers that are involved within the hospitality industry and surrounding it. And for that to kind of be recognised, because I think we were talking before, but, one of the things I think was good to come out of the pandemic was that people suddenly realised that hospitality spaces weren't just somewhere to go and eat or somewhere to go and stay. They were places that were about creating communities or social connections, or were really important for people's physical well-being to get out of their house and to go and be in. Or they were forming part of a high street, which made part of a community, or they were places where people came together and celebrated or connected with one another. So they were facilitating so many different physical and emotional kind of important factors that, and I think people didn't really realize that. They just thought it's a pub, it's a restaurant, it's a hotel. And so I think shining the light a bit more on how important hospitality spaces are, and the fact that actually as an industry, there's a great many careers and a great kind of contribution to the economic and social vibrancy of our culture. That's the ones I would like to wave loud. So people appreciate.
And I love that. And actually, I've been thinking a lot about it recently as well. One thing, we need recognition, and we have to work for that, and we need to deliver. And actually, I think that is the moment we can do now, because we can do something, for example, tech and AI can't do. It's very interesting. And this is just, again, how it's appreciated. This is a very simple way of understanding. I'm involved in a business right now. We are raising funds, and it is, of course, a food business and a hospitality business. And if it was a tech business, I would get 10 times more evaluation than I do where we are now, which is ridiculous, because actually this is as important. It's about food, which is going to be a challenge in a moment. I can tell you, when people are standing in the supermarket, it's not going to be fun at all. It's going to be worse than last time when the shelf was empty, because there is pressures on the food supply chain. So food should actually, from both a business incentive and a government incentive, really, and hospitality really be in the center of everything, because also it makes us feel good. And that's why I'm in the industry, because it's an industry where you can work and you can see the direct effect of when you have done the really good work, no matter what level you're on. You can see that impact on the guest or the employees you're working with, or your colleagues or your employees you're responsible for. And I think that's really where the industry shines. But nobody tells those stories. They talk about all the failures when everything goes wrong. And if we hear about all the failures in other industries, they will also be looked at as bad places to work. And I think lots of people actually, funny, there's a company in the US that's called Singerman's, actually, where they see now, they are in Ann Arbor, so they're a remote business. It's a beautiful place in Michigan. And now there's people that works in accountancy job, advertising job in New York that apply for, restaurant server job, because they want that human touch for a period of their life, because they've been sitting behind the screen. So they're totally disillusioned with corporate America. So that's really interesting. And I think there's a huge opportunity to get to there. But of course, as an industry, we need to do the work, as we always have to do. But I agree with you. If that could go away and everybody saw the brilliance of the industry and how important it was, I think also we could run better businesses. And that's because the price of the meal would be different. It would be more in the right end of what you need to be to make a profitable business. You said as well, you've been on this journey and you got involved in the business. And I said, we'll come back to that, where you took over the reins, you and your business partner, Rachel, took over the reins of the business from two founders to set up the business. Talk a bit about, why you made that decision, because often people want to go and start their own business. They want to, it's my startup, it's my idea. I want to go and scale this and sell it to the world. And you already done an consultancy business before, so you had your own business before, but why take something on like as you are, because it's not your thing? Why is that interesting?
Well, I think I started sort of my journey with DESIGNLSM, as I say, after maternity leave of my second child, and so I think I was kind of nurtured into the business in terms of, with Steve and Simon, our previous founders, really lovely people. They'd been, we've been operating for 37 years, so a really long time. They'd been through lots of different economic challenges and opportunities. They'd, had an amazing client roster and been are really well regarded as individuals within the industry. And I think learning from them and seeing that at the same time as doing something exciting was part of that reason. But there's also, as I say, because when I joined, I brought in a kind of a different look, a different way of looking into our kind of service that we provided our clients with this strategic kind of vision or looking at kind of a proposition and concept creation. So I think as I continued my journey with DESIGNLSM, while Steve and Simon were still very much at the reins, they were bringing me in and they were talking to me really closely about sort of what their, where they wanted to take the company and what their vision was and how they were going to, looking at their succession planning. And so that journey had been one that had been being talked about for quite a number of years before it came to the point of Steve retiring. And then, as I say, it was Steve retired in 2019. And then Simon retired last month. So it has been a progression. And I think they were really, really accommodating with both myself and Rachel to talk to us about what did we see the future of DESIGNLSM being. So it wasn't just on the day that they both retired, we've suddenly switched to doing what we want to do. It was very much a kind of an evolution and a journey that we all went on together. And I think I wanted to continue that because I think the legacy that they created is phenomenal. The reputation that they've created is great, both within our industry as in terms of within my colleagues or competitors within the industry, but also with clients within the industry, great relationships there. But also, as I've been working, I've started to formulate my new relationships with my clients. And I very much see that they're older than me. They, with their network of clients, were going through certain transitions. And now I'm doing that with kind of the network that I've been creating, and we're now going on that journey. And I think that's really interesting, is to take something and evolve it, because I think we've got a lot of goodwill, we've got a lot of really great reputation, we've got a lot of strength in our portfolio and our network of other co-consultants and clients that we've worked with. But now Rachel and I are kind of taking it on to our next chapter. And I think that's really, really exciting. I think it's just as much hard work as if you're starting something from scratch on your own. But I think it's also, we have had the generosity of Steve and Simon that we've been able to mold and now start to kind of really shape and form that shape of a new chapter for Design LSM. So I think why, it was absolutely a fantastic opportunity to be given. And I think it would have been a mistake to have sort of said, no, I'm just going to go and start it off on my own, because I wouldn't have had all of that pedigree and that history. And I wouldn't have also had the years of experience that Steve and Simon have imparted to both me and Rachel about lessons that they've learned, and just how to run a business and how to survive through numerous recessions like they did. And so when it came to COVID, actually, Rachel and I had just bought into the business just after Brexit and just before COVID. So, we bought into a hospitality business as the whole of the hospitality world shut down. But having Simon still as part of the business, he was like, look, we've been through tough times. We've done things like, not quite to the same level as before, but this is how we coped previously. And this is what we did. And this is the management structure or the kind of reporting structure that we've put into place to help us get through these times. And so actually that was invaluable. All of that information was like a crash course into how to run a business within the first couple of months of us owning it because of COVID. And I think it's just as exciting to take an existing business on a new chapter and to kind of see it grow. Although slightly daunting, I think one of Simon's words last month was, look after my baby. So, the only
big responsibility. Yeah.
No, exactly. So it's not something we take lightly. But we're really excited about sort of how we see kind of our stamp on the Design LSM mark going. And somebody said to me at a conference last week, they're like, have you started thinking about your succession plan yet? And I was like, I've only just, really realistically, it's, although Rachel and I bought into it in 2019, it's now really officially become ours and only from last month. But I think, she was right, actually. Yeah. Thinking about that journey, the sooner you can think about it and the sooner you can vaguely understand where you want to take the business is really important. But I think it's also important not to be too set on that path, is to kind of take one step at a time, but try and kind of see where that goal you might want to be achieving is, and try and kind of take one step at a time to try and achieve that, but be flexible, because there'll be sure to be kind of things and obstacles and curves in that pathway that you need to take. But I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And the reason why I asked you the question is that I actually think there's going to be a lot of these situations, especially in hospitality as well, where there's a lot of business that's been around for generations, where actually there's an opportunity to go in and get involved in that. You might be employed in one, and you actually, maybe if they haven't asked, maybe go and ask them, what is their plan? Because actually there's a possibility to bring on a legacy that has to be, instead of it just shuts down. And actually, I think I totally agree. It is as hard as starting your own business. It's just other challenges you have. And actually, as you said, you have a huge responsibility. You're maybe bringing on a legacy. And I mentioned Singerman's before, and the founder, Ari, told me, and I think they've gone through the transition now, but they are doing a transfer of the ownership from the two founders, Ari and Paul, down to 25 partners they have in the wider business. So they are a business of 18 business in total. Okay. It's a big business, but it's really interesting. And the main reason why Ari and Paul is doing that, they want to make sure Amazon don't get their hands on the business. That's their goal. I don't want Amazon to own, or some kind of investor that don't care, or somebody, because it's a very good business. So how do you actually get the right people to own your business? And then how can you actually get involved in a business like that? Because also, it might be also an ability. One of the things I see in entrepreneurs that starts from themselves from scratch is that they might doing a lot of things they're not good at, because they have to get the business up and running. If you get involved in business and running, you can maybe use your super skills from day one. And so just an interesting way of looking at how you can become an entrepreneur in hospitality as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think, it goes back to that be curious and be, that we talked with common thread now through this conversation. But it's that passion and curiosity that I think, helped, and lack of ego from Steve and Simon in terms of they weren't afraid for things to change, and they weren't afraid for Rachel and I to kind of push those boundaries and be inquisitive and sort of take that risk. And I think, as you say, it's that sort of be inquisitive, be curious, take that opportunity to go and ask or to look at how things are, because there's a world of opportunity that will come to you if you do.
What would be your one advice, Holly, to leaders out there right now? What would you say they should think about, maybe go and do? What is it like, if you could give one advice?
One piece of advice. I mean, I've said be curious about a million times, so I'm not going to say that again, but I think that's one of them. I think it seems counterintuitive, but take some time. I think we are so busy on a day-to-day basis. And, I know certainly from myself because we've got satellite offices in Dubai. So I travel over there to the Middle East. We've got projects all around the Middle East. We've got project, we're an international design studio. So I am traveling quite a bit, whether it be on site or to conferences. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in the answering your emails immediately, being in front of a client, doing all of those things, that sometimes actually just taking a moment to pause and just to think about how you want to develop, where you want to develop, and what those little baby steps are that you need to take in order to get to that goal. Because I think otherwise you can end up just being so busy. And then when you do stop and look back, you're like, have I even progressed further along that path that I wanted to progress? Or have I just taken a million little journeys off? They've all been really successful and fun to do. But have they enabled me to kind of keep taking my step forwards to my end goal? So I think taking that time to pause, to reflect if that end goal is still the same end goal you want it to be, and if you are taking the right baby steps to get there.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that vision you talked about before. Like, what is the end, the end goal, but what is the vision in 5 years? What is it in 10 years? What is it in 20 years for where we're going? And actually, so lots of people say to me when I say that, and then what it's not really relevant because the business could totally be changed. He said that's why you need to think about it, because then you actually are much more in charge about the change than you think you are. Because you can react when the opportunity comes, or when you can feel now it's going in the wrong way, you pull the handbrake. That could be for opening the wrong restaurant sites, to hiring the wrong people, to scaling too fast. There's so many ways that could stop before, if you're not just being in the mode of doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be afraid of, I think it's also good, you shouldn't be afraid of learning from mistakes that you do make. Mistakes aren't, there's so many podcasts out there about that, but mistakes aren't a bad thing as long as you learn from them. And I think that's the thing, is taking that time to learn from them and taking that time to kind of understand what happened and how to rectify that and move forward in a really positive way. So I think optimism, can I add in optimism as well? Be optimistic. As you're taking time to pause, make sure that you're being optimistic, because I think that's really important. I think, I was talking to Rachel about this the other day, about us as new leaders. How do we want to be seen? How do we want to inspire our team? And I think being optimistic is so important, because, it kind of brings that positivity into the team. It inspires that kind of curiosity into them. It empowers them. And I think kind of being genuine, being optimistic, and taking that time to kind of making sure that those things are happening there you go. Those are my lessons that I would take forward.
I'll just add to that, because this is so interesting, because I've had a period where I was not super optimistic recently, and I actually found out was because I didn't take time, as you said, to tune out. And actually where I became aware was actually I was watching something totally random that came up. I really loved Eastern philosophy and so on. Oh, there was the Dalai Lama and what is called the Archbishop of South Africa, Desmond Tutu, and the late Desmond Tutu, and they were talking about joy in troubled times. And you just see these two people. I was like, all the pain they had to go together with their people and their religion in troubled time, and they still was they were so optimistic, I think. And then they asked him at some point, how do you get this energy to be so optimistic and positive all the time? They said, because we step away from it and take time to find ourselves and make sure that we actually be aware about where we are. So we are not just in the grind of solving all the big problems we've been told as religious leaders. And that's really interesting. Often as leaders, we just think we need to work harder. But I think what we need to do is the counterintuitive about stepping away from it. And I just thought, yeah, you said it very beautiful as well. It just made me think again, that's actually what we need, because we need optimism in troubled times in an industry we're in right now. And it's a bit troubled in the moment, but we'll get there. I see so many positive signs. Now the question you don't want to have comes. We've already made it. The last question before we close off. I love this question because there always comes something interesting out of it. What is the one question you wished I've asked you in this interview? What would it be, and what is the answer?
Oh my gosh, you are throwing it. We've talked so much. What is my one question? Do you know, I don't know what the question would be, but I think it's about balance. Because I think, we've talked a lot about kind of things I enjoy about work and things like that. But I think just from our last conversation about positivity and joy and taking a step back, I think it's about balance. I am a mum of 2 young children, and I think it's about a balance of not restricting what you can do, I think. And it's interesting. I think, as I say, my journey was never going to be, I am going to graduate from university from a degree in marketing and business comms through film, through owning my own business consultancy, through to now owning a design studio. I never sort of had that path, but I think it's about making sure that you kind of have that kind of not set path, that you have that view that things can change, and that there's a balance there. Because I think I was talking to my niece who is pregnant with her first child, and she was like, I've really just built my career up and I don't know really what I want to do, and now I don't want to lose it, but I want to be a good mom. And she was like, I really need to talk to you. And I was just like, actually, I think as a woman in business, there is so much pressure that you have to, if you're owning your own business, that you have to, as we've just said, be there all the time, leading from the front kind of thing. And then as a mum, there's so much pressure of parental guilt of you should be at every school play, you should be at every swimming gala, you should. So I think the question really is what would I put out there as a woman owning a business is that I think it's about that balance, and it's about sort of getting the right team of people around you that support you and that you support yourself to get that right balance, to make sure you're doing the best that you can do of all of those things. And you can only do your best. Can't always do your greatest, but you can only do your best. And as long as you're feeling that you're doing that, then, or you're working towards that, then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think you have to remember, you're always harder than yourself than what reality is. And I think doing your best, I think it's a great advice. And I think something we all can learn from. I think sometimes we get a bit obsessed about we have to be available as leaders, and often sometimes we just need to step away. And it goes both to men and women, and actually go and recharge from, if you have a family that should give you energy, hopefully, and I want to spend time there. And I think often you become too obsessed that actually you need to be there. I think you said it very well. Oh, I need to be there. I need to show up to that. But actually, often you don't, because again, it's the 20% that gives 80%, and that is the hardest discipline, because that's prioritizing what's best for you and the business. Because actually, if you show up better by prioritizing time with your children, the next day the impact's going to be better on the bottom line, no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think it's about that team around you, isn't it? It's like that team or that supporting tools around you. So it's like you're empowered. So it's about empowerment as well. So it's empowering, like I always empower my girls to sort of, to feel their best, to sort of try and do their best. But, it as long as they feel that they've tried to do their best, then that's what we celebrate with them. And I think that's the thing as a leader is like, try to do your best, but have the tools around you to recognize exactly that either it's the team you're supporting or it's the kind of knowledge that you've imparted. It's that kind of support framework that you've put around you so that if you're not physically there, you've put the best tool and the best framework in place that supports everyone else around there and that still helps you get towards that end goal. So I think that's a really important thing. I know we've completely jumped off now from that one question that you asked, but yeah, I think
no, because it's still about doing your best, and I think really we need to think about that as well. And when things are hard, we often can't see the result. But actually, if you ask yourself, did I actually do my best today? Then, and you can answer, yes, I did. Then it's success. You're done. Back tomorrow. Holly, thank you so much for this conversation. There was lots of great advice on how to build a concept and also how to stand out in the crowded market, but also lots of personal learnings for self-reflection from a leadership point of view. So thank you for sharing that. Where should people go if they want to learn more about maybe the agency and the work you're doing, but also you? Where's the best place to connect?
So our website, DESIGNLSM.com, or our Instagram, obviously being a visual design studio. We love the form of visual social media. So that is DESIGNLSM_UK, or I often, although maybe not enough to our marketing managers' demands, post on my own Instagram account, kind of just as a leader, kind of, and things that I'm doing at Holly_Hallam_design, DLSM, so I say that again? Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, give that one more time.
Sorry. So our website, which is DESIGNLSM.com, or our Instagram posts, which are DESIGNLSM_UK, or my own Instagram, which sort of follows me more from a leader and a kind of out and about social perspective, is Holly_Hallam_DLSM.
Great. We'll put all that in the show notes so people can find you, connect with you if they have any questions. Thank you again for coming to the show. Power and energy to you and the team as you're doing a positive dent on the industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.